Hey there, and welcome to the podcast Life as a show intently focused on exploring and unearthing the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. On today's episode, we have a special one for you. If you ever had any interest in learning about publishing or PR communications or business development, then you ought to find someone who is not only highly experienced, but also someone who is incredibly passionate about it all. Well, we've got that trifecta of content covered for you, with a guest who has lived all around the world doing all of that and more. Throw in her contributions to TEDx events in multiple countries, experiences on organizing committees for global entrepreneurship events, plus her advocacy and devotion to women in STEM, and you've got a guest you'll enjoy listening and learning from. Cindy Mullins is a New Zealand-based publisher, a literary agent, and PR and business development professional at Media Tectonics. Having worked globally for over 30 years with major stints in Asian markets, her experiences and connections run deep. And they need to. In Cindy's own words, her job is about bringing together a mosaic of talent from multiple disciplines, like pieces in a giant jigsaw puzzle. It takes authors, editors, designers, artists and illustrators, video producers, printers, marketing and salespeople, distributors, IT engineers, and rights negotiators, each contributing a piece of the whole to produce a successful book, journal, magazine, video, ad campaign, or web portal. As a literary agent, Cindy has helped countless clients' dreams come true with successful book proposals, introductions, and published works. In her role as a PR communications and business development professional, she has leveraged her extensive network of award-winning designers, writers, filmmakers, and production partners to help global brands have their stories told and products and services sold in markets around the world. Finally, Cindy has also had a hand in helping clients share their message on web-based platforms, TV conferences, and at corporate events. She has arranged client interviews on network platforms like CNN, BBC, and CNBC, amongst others. Her clients' messages have been read and quoted in publications around the world. These days, you can find Cindy attracting global changemakers and social impact investors to the mighty Waikato region of New Zealand and doing market entry consulting for Japan and New Zealand. Also, business development, PR, and marketing. On that note, Cindy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Cindy and I go way back, shared time within Tokyo. And before we get into this, I must say she was probably one of the most connected people I know in Tokyo. Just about anyone, if you mentioned your name to anyone, I'm sure everyone would have a delightful story to share. So it truly is a pleasure. And I'm really, really excited to have this talk with you today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Well, why don't we just jump right into it? I've got our first segment here, Cindy. It's called Coloring Wikipedia. And basically, it's a segment in which we try to add some zest to otherwise dry explanations of particular professions. And I also like reading these things off because it kind of gives us a jumping off point in terms of identifying aspects which these definitions don't cover, hidden points to some of these jobs. And in terms of this, I went with a catch-all phrase for you of business development. And this is just simply due to the fact that your professional experiences are quite varied. Also, just to give you a little bit of warning here, I am intentionally using the most vague explanation to allow you to possibly expand on what I've just briefly outlined. All right?
Yeah.
And okay? Okay, so here we go. Business development. Business development entails tasks and processes to develop and implement growth opportunities within and between organizations. Very short, very sweet. What have you got for us, Cindy?
Everything is business development.
That's right.
I've been in the startup community for decades. Remember Japanic magazine?
Yeah.
When we started that in 1998 to 2001, I guess it was.
Yeah.
And we were covering the rise of the internet and the e-commerce and net businesses and all of that. And so business development at that time in a startup is just do everything that needs doing, right? And so you always wear so many hats, right? So you can't really say, when I put business development on here, it was because the tech company that I was working for here in New Zealand had asked me to do business development for them in Japan because they wanted to get more investors, from overseas. So in that sense, it's bringing in investors. If somebody has business development on their, they're either meeting with customers or they're trying to get an investment into the company, I think. But really, it's kind of a catch-all for just everything that goes on that you need to do. So,
in terms of, I guess, that role relating to the PR communication side and publishing, how, if you could consider it in that context, maybe you could shed some light on that point.
In that context, you would be driving authors' works out to the public, or you would be trying to market your services in conferences, major publishing conferences. Like I went to the London Book Fair one year, and met with various publishers and let them know that I'm here. And, so I ended up working for a few.
Okay. Well, this might be a difficult question to follow up with, but I'd be curious to hear about a typical day and what that would entail for you. I mean, you just mentioned like wearing several hats, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's probably an impossible question, an impossible answer here, but maybe even you could just speak to that point of why it is so difficult and what, give an example of how.
I think that's why I love the industry so much, is because not one day is like the other. You're constantly working with different authors. Like when I was at Tuttle, I had editorial teams in Hawaii at University of Hawaii. And then I had a designer over in Singapore. And then I had another team in Tokyo that was working on another book. And so you were constantly juggling teams around the world, sort of thing. So no day is the same. There's just no way.
Yeah, I thought I'd throw that out there, but I was kind of expecting that answer, to be quite honest. But as you said, I think that really does, give you sort of that perspective and interest and intrigue. Each day you wake up, you don't know exactly what's going to transpire because there's so many different things going on. Not to mention just the types of people that you're interacting with. I mean, that's got to be quite interesting as well. And, continuous learning opportunities that are just always revealing themselves.
Yeah. So, for example, recently I published Ted Matsumoto's book, The Day AI Becomes God.
Okay.
The Singularity Will Save Humanity. He had published it in Japanese, and he just contacted me and said, can you do the English language version? Sure, Ted, I'll be happy to. And so it was translated, and I edited the translation. And if you say a typical day of working on a book, it would be, I'll help with the book proposal. If it's going to go to another global publisher, I'll make sure the author completes every aspect of a book proposal form. And then I'll edit that book proposal form. And then I'll introduce it to, publishers globally and see if anybody bites, that kind of thing. So you make other people look good, right? So if you that's what PR is. You're making everybody else look good. So, for example, when you asked me to do a podcast, I thought, the last person I want to talk about is myself. I'm always hyping other people.
Well, I think that's what makes it so interesting is, we get to change things around here. Finally, this is your chance to shine, Cindy. This is your chance to promote yourself. Yeah, let loose, let it go.
But I don't want to, that kind of thing. I'm much more comfortable promoting somebody else. So.
I know. To be honest, I think most people are. I mean, what I've also found interesting in doing a lot of, a series of these talks, I mean, still we're in our infancy here of this podcast, but a lot of people have said afterwards of just the opportunity it provided in terms of reflecting on their careers and, thinking back to moments that, just kind of get tucked away and it can be a bit of a rewarding experience. So I truly hope that by the end of this talk, that's where you're at least. But,
no, it was. I told you in my email, wow, this is like a walk down memory lane, because I had to think about all of the things that I had done. And so it was kind of fun. Yeah, it's really fun.
All right. Well, let's skip on over to our next segment here. It's something called a Q&A discovery. And I've got a few questions for you, but I'll lead off with this one. The idea of a strong network, it's already been referenced today when I was introducing you, but if you could, maybe you could speak to that point a little bit more, just the value of a strong network and what it can do as far as launching careers or, continuing them on.
Yeah, actually, my network that's my IP, I guess, as it were. And the reason that I have that network, one was Tedx Tokyo, right?
Yeah.
I worked with Todd Porter for 5 years on that. And we met some amazing people from around the world. And the other thing was I worked for the Foreign Correspondence Club of Japan for 5 years. I was a member before that. And they were losing members. Journalists were, media companies were closing their doors. And so, Time Magazine left and Newsweek left. And it was just really the industry was changing. So I ended up working there. And to get more members, I had to visit all of the major networks. So I would go to Bloomberg and Reuters and Associated Press and Kyoto News. And it was just really a lot of fun because I got to see what the inside was like. And Bloomberg has the best food, by the way. They have all of their snacks out in this huge vestibule. It was really fun. And but anyway, I got to visit there, but also I joined every other organization. So I went to all of the chambers of commerce meetings. So I would go to the Swiss and the French and the British and the American and the Canadian, So I would go to all these networking events and I must have handed out like thousands and thousands and thousands of business cards, right? And so my Rolodex, that's my IP. So like if you ask me, oh, do you know anybody in so-and-so? Yeah, I know so-and-so. I'll be happy to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that's probably commonly known as well. I mean, don't forget to insert your charming personality as well in there, Cindy. I think that's helped open up a lot of doors for you too. I mean, I remember meeting you for the first time and being struck by that right away. I mean, there's something down to earth and genuine about meeting you for the first time. I think that
I just love hearing people's stories. So, I guess I'm a good listener. So I love to hear their stories. So I'll tell you this one story about every New Year's at the Foreign Correspondence Club, we had a hacks and flacks. Hacks being the writers, the journalists. They would meet the PR people from all the major companies, right? So we'd have like 250 people in a room. And it would be from Sony and Coca-Cola and P&G, Procter & Gamble, whatever. So all the major companies would come with the PR agents. And because I had listened to all these stories, I could kind of look over the room and go, oh, you need to talk to so-and-so. And then I would get people together and say, oh, he's working on this. So you need to work on it.
Yeah, just playing that role of facilitator. And
I just realized that's what I love more than anything is putting people together and then magic happens, And
almost like, I guess the byproduct of that is like for these successful sort of like introductions, the people that are meeting somebody else that they know is going to help them. I don't think anyone ever forgets that original introduction. And that's always going to put you in quite the positive light because you're doing something that's, in a way, it's not directly benefiting you. You're really going out and thinking of what this person's needs are and this person's needs are. And people recognize that stuff and they don't easily forget those types of things. So I can see how that, can be such a successful way of building a network. And I think that's maybe the first gem of this conversation that somebody could really take away.
Yeah, well, it's just fun for me. So I'm just doing what's fun.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. They say you don't have to, if you find something that you love to do, you won't have to work another day in your life. That's the way I feel about my career. It's just fun.
Lucky you. Good for you as well. This conversation point now, it's kind of a nice point to transition to my next question here. I mean, it would seem that your job is, like we just talked about, successfully opening up doors for others and for clients, whether they be in the publishing, PR, business development related fields. But I'd love to know about how this has worked in reverse for you, over the years. So by doing all these things, by introducing, these two companies or these two representatives from these companies, how have things come back to you, maybe opened up doors for yourself?
oh, it's just enriched my life immeasurably. And it actually, Tedx Tokyo, that experience, when I got to New Zealand, I thought, oh, I really want to know who the movers and shakers are here, right? So I'll just go down and volunteer for Tedx Auckland, right? And so I told them I had done Tedx Tokyo. And so I volunteered there. And the very first meeting, I met my future CEO at the tech company that I was working at. And because he reminded me of a client in Tokyo, he had started a business at age 12. And, he was just an entrepreneur. And we just hit it off. And it was like, we know we're going to work together, but we don't know how.
Right.
And so he tried to get me in on some clean energy thing in Dominican Republic. And that fell through because of, they turned it into a coal thing instead of clean energy. And then one day he calls me out of the blue and he says, Cindy, I've met Alex St. John and we've started this company and can you come work for us? That's our, and I'm now in Cambridge, New Zealand because of that conversation in Auckland at Tedx Auckland, because I did get them Japanese investors and they were all coming to Cambridge. So they put me up in an apartment here in Cambridge and said, you got to come and welcome the Japanese guests, because I was the only one who could speak Japanese. And so that's how I got to Cambridge. My husband would come down on the weekends and he would say, oh, this is a really great town. And so we bought a house here and we just love it. I'm not with the tech company anymore, but we just love being here.
What a delightful story that is. I mean, it's amazing how these simple, small little things, like that proverbial sort of like snowball, you just get it rolling and suddenly it just becomes like these tiny little decisions, or these seemingly tiny decisions, to speak to this person, to meet that person, to volunteer here, to do this, to do that, can just turn your life and the course of where you're going on a whole different trajectory. And it's just absolutely fascinating. And that story really kind of shows it.
Yeah. So my key advice is volunteer. Volunteer for something bigger than yourself, right?
Yeah. Excellent. Alrighty. Well, I've got another question here for you, Cindy. Acknowledging, again, experience and attachment within the Japanese market, I think it might be intriguing for listeners to hear what defining aspects of that market and culture affected you professionally.
Everything. I have in my bio on Clubhouse that Japan is still my home. We still have a house there, and just can't get back because of the pandemic. But, the culture of just caring for the other person, even in the tea ceremony, you turn the cup around 3 times to make sure that the person on the other side of you can enjoy the beauty of it. That, to me, sort of sums up everything. And also business, you try to help the other person to succeed and everything. So
yeah, and definitely. I mean, it's very client driven in terms of the business side of things, and really considering their side and vantage points, extensively to the point at which sometimes it can be slow things down a little bit, at least from a foreign perspective when you're looking at the Japanese market and business practices. But there is certainly some value in taking things a little bit slowly. And sometimes maybe that's something that, is a lesson that a lot of Western companies could adhere to or take on a little bit more. But
also the efficiency like of the Taku-bean service, the delivery service. One example is a taxi driver was going to come and pick me up and take me to Narita. This is in Nagano. I was in Nagano. And he called to let me know he was going to be 3 minutes late. And sure enough, he came 3 minutes late on the dot. And I just went, oh my goodness, I love this service.
Yeah, I know. I've got a story as well. I remember my early days of living in Japan. I've been here nearly 20 years now too. And I remember, I think some friends of ours, we ordered something, we went to a McDonald's and it was a takeout. And we got home and I think there was like a French fry, like a small or medium sized French fry that was missing. And one of my Japanese friends at the time called up the McDonald's and noted that. And of course, they apologized profusely. And what they did is they sent a driver over to our house, maybe not that far, but still maybe 10, 15 minutes away from the actual store or restaurant. And they hand delivered this medium sized French fries and again, apologized profusely for it. So can you imagine something like that happening say within, America or Canada or New Zealand or anywhere, any Western country. Get out of here. I mean, that's never going to happen. It's definitely a unique point for this market.
I have to tell you one more story. I lost my telephone, my mobile phone, right? Your whole life is in this. And went by the Koban. We were living in Yotsuya. And I went by the Koban, just thought, the Koban is police box, sorry. And I went by the police box and I said, by any chance, have you had a phone? No, they didn't have it. They asked me my number. I went back a month later. I walked by and they gave me a piece of paper. They called and said, go 3 stops down. Here's the map to the little building. I walked in, handed them the paper. They gave me my phone. This was like 6 weeks after I had lost it. And I thought, out of 35 million people in the wider Tokyo area, how did they know? And while I'm sitting there, people are picking up keys and billfolds and, whatever. It just kind of boggles your mind.
Oh, I know. We could probably go back and forth trading stories for this because I've got a slew as well. But no, you're right. I mean, it's something that anyone who hasn't experienced that particular charm of the Japanese people and the culture itself, you're certainly missing out. So I would encourage anyone who's listening, if ever they have the chance and whenever this pandemic does finally end, to get over here and experience it for yourself. But we're going to move over into a different segment here, a water cooler story. And basically here, I just ask guests to indulge listeners with a personal story relating to their job. And we've already gone over a couple stories here and it's been so much fun. I'm really excited to hear what you've got for this next one here.
I've had so many experiences, meeting different people that I spend half my life pinching myself going, is this real? Am I really here? What happened? And one of them was when I got a contract with the International Monetary Fund. So the joke at my house was I worked for Christine Lagarde. She was heading up. And they had actually called my friend Tim Berlin, and who's a book salesman for publishers in Tokyo. And they wanted us to get 3 estimates for printing in Tokyo because they were coming over for the World Bank meetings 2012. So every finance minister in the world was coming to Tokyo. And it was right near the Foreign Correspondents Club at the Tokyo International Forum. And we went and met with different publishers, and Tim had to go out of town or something. So that's why he got me on board, because he had to leave and I needed to fill in. But what was so interesting is that I worked on was a book. We went to pick up the proofs, to make sure the proofs were good. And, we had to drink tea with the publishers and bow and all of that kind of stuff. And that book went into the hand of every finance minister in the world, But what was funny is we had to get them through the security gauntlet because it was just so tight with security everywhere. And so we had to set up a relay of, telephone numbers they could call to make sure that they were legitimate, getting through the gauntlet and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, that was my water cooler story. I just thought, that was just so fun. But it was kind of nerve-wracking too,
Yeah, I could certainly see how that would be a pinch yourself moment. Like, what am I doing here? How did I end up in this position? What's going on here? But yeah. What an interesting.
It was crazy. We got to talk to the Washington, D.C. office. That's who hired us, from the Washington, D.C. office. And then we would work with the local IMF office,
Right.
Anyway, it was just really cool.
So cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Cindy, to let our listeners know. In preparing for the interview, I asked guests to send through some pictures that I can put up on the website. And you kindly sent over, 3 or 4. And one of them, was struck by right away. And I want to ask you about that right now. And it was you and the current New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, in a picture together. I'd love to hear the story behind that.
Yeah, she is my hero. She's keeping us safe and, in this pandemic. And but I met her before the pandemic. I met her in, I guess it was 2018. I was on the Digital Strategy Committee of the Waikato Economic Development Agency. And so when there was a luncheon with Jacinda coming, which was in Matamata, which is only about 15-minute drive from here, which is where Hobbiton is, at the plantation. It was this really nice restaurant. There were about maybe 150 of us. And so I just couldn't help but go and say, Jacinda, could I have a picture with you? That was all it was. I didn't get to talk to her or anything, although I did say something about a project I was working on. I said, I'd really like to talk to you about this. And she said, well, not right now. I said, yes, I know. But at least I got to meet her, and I have.
It's an excellent picture, I might add.
Yeah, thank you. It was really fun. But no, she's just an amazing woman. She has such a compassionate heart. And when the pandemic started, her first words to us was, be kind to your neighbors, be kind to family and friends, and keep each other safe. And so
that became a soundbite heard around the world. And it just spoke to, obviously, her character and who she's all about and what, her true intentions, goals are.
Yeah. Really special.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. It was it's a nice little add-on, a bonus story there. All right. Well, we are moving along at a pretty nice clip here. We're heading actually into the last segment, which is a crystal ball segment. And basically, we're just kind of shifting more towards the future, where I'm asking guests about their specific profession or industry in terms of trends, predictions, so on and so forth. But I'd like to lead off with this question here. I'd love to hear where you think the industries you've worked in are going. I mean, we're truly in an age of digital revolution. And from a layman's perspective, I mean, media fragmentation and splintering has never been greater. So how do you see the publishing, PR, and communications professions evolving, say, 5 to 10 years down the line?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's changing by the day, right? The reason my company is called Media Tectonics, like the tectonic plates, because the ground is shifting beneath us every moment. So that was the name of that I started when I did seminars, career seminars, kind of like what you're doing, but with a crowd of people, in a room. It was because the ground was shifting. Journalism changed. Media companies were closing. Publishers, it's a volume business, right? So the only way a lot of them can keep up now with everything moving online, like librarians, I worked for John Wiley and Sons Scientific Technical Medical Publishing with all their scientific journals. I think at the time we had 800. And so, people weren't wanting to pay the subscription prices for the journals when you could get the online version, right? But it's still the same amount of work that goes into peer review and, publishing and all of that. So I think for publishers to stay alive, they're consolidating, right? So, for example, Wiley had bought up the Dummies. So I did some work for the Dummies brand and photos, travel guides, and they're buying health tech and health-related stuff. So people are just getting more and more brands under their belt to stay alive in a digital transition. So I guess that's going to continue. I can't see it not, continuing. And so, you're still going to need quality. And unfortunately, the digital fragmentation, splintering and all of that. So you're going to get really bad and mediocre and really good. And so I think there'll always be a place, like one of my clients was The Economist. That's always going to be, a top-notch go-to for really good in-depth information, right? So aggregating really quality information is going to be all important.
Yeah. So it sounds like the foundational elements are what will remain in the medium at which how it's being consumed perhaps is what's going to be continually adapting and evolving. But like you said, I mean, it's quality, the quality of the journalism behind it, the quality of the actual content itself and the processes that are tucked into it will remain more than likely.
But just go for the quality. Don't, just ignore the riffraff, as it were.
Right. I mean, you can even see that sometimes now with even just to give an example on, say, Amazon and a lot of the self-publishing sort of industry, which is developed. And I'm sure there's, some good publications have been put out there, but also there's a slew of things out there that probably aren't really going to be worth your time. And, if you get sucked in by a $2 purchase of a book, you're probably really going to notice that difference of defines a professional publication versus someone who's just doing it on their own.
Right. So it's really best to stick with the publishing houses that really vet, the material that they have. So,
I've got one more question relating to this, and just popped in my head now, where I don't know if we're there yet, but I'm finding, at least for myself at times, where, we are racing towards this digital age. And as you said, I mean, there's no stopping it. Of course not. But also at the speed at which we're going, it sometimes catches me where, I'll get absorbed by it all, and I'll take it all in. But then I might return back to, say, like paper-based book. And maybe it's my age speaking right now, I don't know. But like there's something, I don't know, something earthy, something real about that. And I'm wondering whether or not people perhaps are going to, after they've tried out these digital sort of formats and whatnot, if they're going to sort of like go back to things that are still real to them, and there's still value to these older ways of consuming the media, consuming the content. I wonder, like, I have no idea. I have no statistics to back this up, but I wonder if it's ever going to come to a point where people acknowledge, yes, this digital age and where we're going, but then also returning back to the roots of it all, where, there's going to be maybe, a sliver of that industry that's still kind of, maybe kind of like, if we can consider vinyl records, right? Obviously, like with digital music and the way it's consumed now, you have this like really strong base of people that still just swear by vinyl records. And that's all. Yeah. That's the only way that they're going to listen to music. And I wonder if that sort of model, or that sort of like trend could occur within, say, publishing as well.
Yeah, I think it'll probably stay. The books will stay, but you do notice that, and your children will consume almost everything on a mobile phone, right? I actually sold a book, but it was about the mobile phone, everything gravitating to the mobile phone. Oh, the 6 Immutable Laws of mobile business. And everything is going to be on your phone, and your books are going to be, the Kindle and all of that. But I still like to highlight, right, and underline and all of that kind of stuff. So I actually set metal type one time. I got my master's in publishing studies at University of Stirling in Scotland. And we actually printed on a 18th century Columbine printer, and we set metal type. So you had to go through the box and put A, and make your letters and make the whole line. And then leading, which is the space between the lines, that was a bar of lead. That's how that came to be. It was a bar of lead. So you put that in there to keep the letters, separated, the lines separated. And then we printed it on this, we splattered it with ink, and then we pulled the lever, and then there was the paper. And it gave really new meaning to the word rare books. So I think rare books, I mean, that's a huge investment that people make, in rare books. Mm-hmm. And we we were in Germany right before the pandemic started, and went to Wittenberg, and where Martin Luther nailed the 94 treatises to the wall. And they had all of these rare books, it was just amazing. So, I'm in love with books. So they're going to stay around. I know they're going to stay around.
Yeah, well, you're not alone in that respect, I don't think. And I kind of think that we're going to be shifting back a little bit. I think we're going to see like these, like I said, these slivers of these sort of like industries remaining for who knows how long.
These might be antiques worth something someday.
True enough. Well, I've got to say, Cindy, I mean, this has been a lot of fun. I've truly enjoyed the conversation and the stories, first and foremost. So, we are drawing to a close here. So I would like to thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on your podcast series. I was really excited to hear this. And I love the fact that you're doing careers because, like I told you before, I started a master's in career counseling because I wanted to teach career counseling. So I'm loving what you're doing here. Good luck and congratulations.
Thanks so much. It really means a lot. Well, for those interested in learning more about Cindy and her work, you can find her on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you missed it, this information will be included in the show notes. Also, if you like today's show, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcasts. And don't forget to share. If you find an episode you like, share it with a friend. Yeah, the more people that can listen, I think, the better off we'll all be. Better mutual understandings of each other and what we do is certainly never a bad thing. And of course, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as a, where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm Christopher Schoenwald, your host. Until next time, stay curious about life and living.